Hello, everyone, and welcome to Magic the Gathering Standard Weekly. I'm Scott, and for the next little bit, we're going to talk about Dominaria United spoilers from August 23rd, 2022. And before we get started, I want to remind you of two things. Thanks to Caffeinated Gamers for supporting our content here. And also, please like and subscribe to the video and to Caffeinated Gamers. We'd appreciate that very much. Alright, so let's get into Dominaria United spoilers. Our first card of the day is Karn Sylex. For 3 mana, you get a legendary artifact that enters the battlefield tapped, and with this card, players can't pay life to cast spells or to activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. So what Karn Sylex is doing is it's shutting down Phyrexian mana, and it's shutting down anything that costs life to activate. So we've got a number of things. Tenacious Underdog is the first one that comes to mind, where to blitz it out of your graveyard, you have to pay 2 life. Well, you can't blitz it out of the graveyard when Karn Sylex is in play. Phyrexians can't reduce the cost of a spell by 1 mana by paying 2 life. So I think Karn Sylex is certainly going to see sideboard play and potentially main deck play if we end up with a lot of Phyrexian decks over the next 2 years of Standard. But the thing that I like, in some ways the most about Karn Sylex is this. You get to pay X mana, and you can exile Karn Sylex, destroy it, and if you do, it destroys each non-land permanent with mana value X or less, activated only as a sorcery. So Karn Sylex can become a board wipe in any deck. One of the problems that green decks sometimes have, blue decks sometimes have, and red decks sometimes have is they don't have the ability to wipe the board if they need to. Well, Karn Sylex gives them the ability to do that. We know in white we've got Depopulate, in black we've got the Meathook Massacre, among other removal cards in black. But this is a card that can be used in any of the colors. I think it's going to see definitely sideboard play. And in the right kind of deck, I think it's main deckable. So our next card is Timeless Lotus. So for 5 mana, you get a legendary artifact that enters the battlefield tapped, but when you tap it, you get 5 mana, 1 of each color. We've seen a lot of Lotuses going all the way back to the beginnings of Magic. To me, this is one of the weaker ones, but I think in the right deck, it might have a chance to see some play. And the deck that I see it getting play in is a Teferi Who Slows the Sunset deck. So we're probably talking about an Azorius deck, or maybe an Esper deck that plays Teferi, because for his +1 ability, you get to choose 1 target artifact, up to 1 target creature, and up to 1 target land, untap the chosen permanents you control, tap the chosen permanents you don't control, you gain 2 life. So on the turn, if you play Teferi on turn 4, you can play Timeless Lotus on turn 5, use Teferi's ability to untap it, and now you've basically reset your mana for the turn, because now you've got 5 mana to now play with after activating Teferi. And then on any turn after that, potentially you can spend, tap it for 5 mana, untap it with Teferi, and now you've got 10 mana to use on a given turn, plus whatever mana you're getting from land. So there's a possibility that you could snowball this into a large amount of land. But again, you kind of have to have this kind of combination. So how standard playable it is, probably not anything we're going to see on the high end of decks. Certainly not, tier 1 or tier 2 decks. But this is certainly an interesting combination that I think people will want to try to play at different points. Our next card is Weatherlight Completed. For 2 mana, you get the legendary artifact vehicle, the Weatherlight. It has flying, and as long as Weatherlight Completed has 4 or more Phyrexia counters on it, it's a Phyrexian creature in addition to its other types. Whenever a creature you control dies, put a Phyrexia counter on Weatherlight Completed. Then draw a card if it has 7 or more Phyrexia counters on it, If it doesn't, scry 1. So Weatherlight is going to, for 2 mana, the minimum it's going to get you is every time a creature dies, you get to scry 1. After you've got 4 Phyrexis counters on it, then it becomes a artifact creature that's a 5/5 creature. The one thing you'll notice about this, it's a vehicle. It doesn't have accruing cost. So that's a big limitation to the card early in the game until you've seen 4 of your creatures die. Now the place I think this might see play is in our Rakdos sacrifice deck, with around Oni Anvil as a possibility. And we got this new card today that is certainly going to be something that will help accelerate the sacrifice effects of creatures in the game. So Lagomos, Hands of Hatred, for 3 mana, a colorless, a black, and a red, you get a legendary creature, Human Shaman, that at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 2/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. So the big thing here is Lagomos is going to every single turn create a creature that will die that turn. So if you play Weatherlight on turn 2, Lagomos on turn 3, as long as Lagomos stays in play, on the 4th turn, Weatherlight completed is going to have 4 counters on it, so on the next turn it can start attacking. Now, as I was saying, Oni Anvil is out there. It sacrifices artifacts. Okay, we're going to see that card in Standard for the foreseeable future. So that card, along with Lagomos, might be a good combination to, not on turn 3, but maybe by turn 4, Weatherlight could be a creature thanks to those 2 abilities and get you that 4 counters that you need to make it into a creature. Certainly, for 2 mana, something that scries every turn, so you're getting a lot of card filtering with the Weatherlight, that's a good ability. To every turn almost guarantee yourself the ability to scry 1. So you can start filtering your deck to get things that you want in your hand and put things you don't want on the bottom of the deck. Now, Lagomos has another ability. You can search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle when you tap it, but you can only activate if 5 or more creatures died this turn. Now, that's going to happen because we have this thing called the Meat Hook Massacre, and it likes to kill creatures. So if you can keep Lagomos in play after using the Meat Hook Massacre, you can tap it, draw a card when you use Meat Hook. So it's got this other secondary ability that I think helps as well. But this is a combination I think we're going to see deck builders try to build around. How good it is, I'm not sure yet, but I think it's certainly something that people are going to try. Next, we have Vidalin Mindsinger. For a colorless and 2 blue, you get a Merfolk Wizard with kicker of 1 and a red or 1 and a green. And when it enters the battlefield, it will enter then the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it for each time it was kicked. So just in that, it kind of is an interesting card just on the surface of that. But why this card is going to see play, and I think we'll see it almost in every kind of blue deck that you're going to imagine over the next 2 years, is that when Vidalin Mindsinger enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature with power less than Vidalin Mindsinger's power for as long as you control Vidalin Mindsinger. So this is still an opponent's creature card on a body. So for 3 mana, you can steal a 1 mana cost creature, or 1 power creature from your opponent. If you can pay the kicker cost, you can get a 3 mana creature, or 3 power creature. If you can pay, you can kick it twice, you can get up to a 5 power creature from your opponent, and as long as Mindsinger's in play, you get to keep that creature. So I think we're going to see this, and it will probably be one of those annoying cards that when it gets played, we all go, oh, I'm so upset, I'm frustrated that I'm seeing this played against me. All right, our next card is Temporary Lockdown. So for a colorless and 2 white, we get an enchantment When temporary lockdown enters the battlefield, exile each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less until temporary lockdown leaves the battlefield. One of the things that we know in Standard is, yes, there are cards that can get rid of enchantments, but very few decks are playing them in their main deck, and we don't even see a lot of cards playing them in their sideboards. So if you're playing against an aggro opponent and you're playing 3 and 4 and 5 mana creature spells, this is a great card to have in your deck because you can, in essence, exile their entire board presence for 3 mana and leave yours on the board. So this is one of those interesting potential board wipes that is only 3 mana. So I can see, if you're playing against an aggro opponent, this comes, and they're going first. They've got 3 creatures out that are all, 2 or 4 creatures out that are all 2 mana or less. You play this, you wipe out their board. They've got 1 or 2 cards in their hand. Now you're going to be in charge of the game from that point forward because it's going to be hard for them to rebuild from that. So I think this is a good card. It certainly is going to see sideboard in white decks, and depending on how aggro the format gets, we're going to see some of it in main decks as well. All right, our next card is Stronghold Arena, which I think is actually one of the better cards of the day. Black is getting, the black deck is getting crowded, very, very crowded, it seems like, because there's a new card you want to play in it every day. So Stronghold Arena is an enchantment that you can kick for a green and or a white. And then when Stronghold Arena enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life for each time it was kicked, which in the big scheme of things probably isn't all that big of a deal, but it's a bonus. What's important about the card is this. When 1 or more creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may reveal the top card of your library. Put it in your hand. If you do, you lose life equal to its mana value. So, most decks are going to be running 24 land. So probably 1 out of 2 times this activates, you're going to draw a land card. So this is going to advance your mana base and allow you to play bigger and bigger stuff. And if you have to pay for it, that's okay, because black has a number of cards that are going to gain you life over the course of a game. Obviously, the biggest one is the Meat Hook Massacre. Every black deck, I expect until that card leaves the format, is going to be playing 2, 3, 4 copies of Meat Hook. And every time they kill one of your opponent's creatures, if that card kills an opponent's creature, well, you gain a life. So I think the life loss potential isn't that big of a deal here. And we've got other cards, in black, we've got lifelink creatures. So I think this is a really good card draw engine that can, in many times, if you've got the right kind of creatures, things with flying or things with menace, that are going to hit your opponent every turn, this is going to draw you a card every turn. So that's a really, really powerful ability. So I expect this to see play in certainly any mono black deck, but in a lot of decks that are going to be playing black, because it's such a good ability. Next we have our Goblins of the day. This is our first time we've seen Goblins in Dominaria United, and we got 2 very interesting ones from the set. We got Rulik, Mon's Warden Chief, for a colorless, a red, and 2 green mana. You get a legendary Goblin with Menace, and whenever Rulik, Mon's Warden Chief attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tap. If you didn't put a card onto the battlefield this way, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. So the Goblin Warden here can A, ramp you, and B, it can grow your battlefield. So in a general broad sense, this is a good card. I wish it had haste. If it had haste, it would be really good, but it doesn't. But I've got a card we'll talk about in just a minute that can actually solve that problem for this card. Our second card we want to talk about before we get into some other Goblin stuff here is Runvelt Hordemaster. You get a Goblin Warrior for 2 mana, and importantly here, other goblins you control get +1/+1. Now this is a 1/1 creature, something that is easily removable from the battlefield. But if you get a couple of these down, they stack on each other, and they become 2/2s, maybe 2/3 or 3/3s, and you're growing your team. Now, why I think this card is definitely going to see play, and in other formats as well, whether it's Pioneer or Modern, is because whenever Runvelt Horde Master or another goblin you control dies, exile the top card of your library. If it's a goblin creature card, you may cast that card until the end of your next turn. So anytime a goblin you control dies, it doesn't matter if it's a token or a creature card. You get to look at the top card of your library, and if it's a goblin, you can cast it. That's a really powerful ability. So I think if we see a dedicated goblin deck in Standard, which is possible, there kind of has been one for over the last year, based on the cards we got out of Forgotten Realms. I think we're going to see this card. And here's what I think it goes with. We've got Fable the Mirror Breaker from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. We got Goro from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. So Fable creates a 2/2 Goblin Shaman that when it attacks, you get to create a treasure, and then when it flips chapter 3, you get another goblin. So it creates in essence 2 goblins for you. And Fable the Mirror Breaker, you would have to be have missed the last 7 months of Standard to not realize that Fable the Mirror Breaker is a really good card, and basically every red deck plays it. Goro hasn't seen much play at all, and the reason I think it is because it's 2 mana, it's kind of vanilla, but it does have an important ability. Creatures you control gain haste until the end of turn. So Goro can enable Rolkis Bonds to be able to attack on the turn it comes into play if you've got an extra mana laying around. It can, if you've got an extra mana, it can make the Goblin Shaman token be able to attack the turn it comes into play. And you also get that ability for 5 mana. You can create a 5/5 red dragon spirit creature token with flying, and again, activate only if you control an attacking modified creature. So there would have to be some modification, giving things a +1/+1 counter, or an aura or something, to make that happen. But that's not really the point of the card. It's that you can give all of your creatures haste. So that means you can give these creatures haste, which leads to the creation of goblin tokens, hopefully. Our next card is Rata Drawback of Ergbord. This legendary zombie wizard for 2 colorless mana and a white and a black. You get a 3/3 zombie with vigilance and ward 2. Nice ability. We haven't seen many cards in white or black get ward. This one's got it. And the reason I think this is an interesting card and potentially playable is other zombies you control have vigilance. In the Innistrad sets, particularly in Innistrad Midnight Hunt, we got a lot of zombie creatures. So there's a zombie deck out there that's not anything that's highly competitive at this point, but there's a deck there. This could be a card that helps push that deck forward to a place where it can see competitive play. So I think we'll see, certainly early in Dominaria United season, a dedicated zombie deck, and I think this is one of the cards that's going to be in it. Also, it gives you a secondary ability that might be very helpful based on what other cards you might want to put into the deck. So whenever another legendary creature you control dies, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary and it's a 2/2 black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. So what this can do if you've got other legends in your deck is you can go ahead, they die, this gets to bring it back from the graveyard, you create a copy of it, it's a 2/2 zombie, and any abilities that it has remain with it. So I think this is an interesting card to put into a dedicated zombie deck, particularly if we get some more legendary zombies or creatures that synergize with our zombie deck to make it go forward. Next, we have Ergbord Legoyaf, I think. For 2 mana, you get a creature that has kicker of blue and or black, and when it enters the battlefield, for each time it's kicked, you get to go ahead and mill 3 cards every time it's kicked, and its power is equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to the number of creatures in your graveyard plus 1. So the worst case scenario is when you cast it, it's a 0/1 and it's on the battlefield. And then if you can kick it, you can put some cards into the graveyard, hopefully there's a few creatures, and you can start growing it. And as the game progresses, as other creatures die, then you can grow the card. So if we have a dedicated graveyard deck, I think this is a perfectly reasonable card to put in it. It has low cost, so there's low investment in it, but it can grow into a pretty big creature over the course of a game. Next, we have Queen Elena of Ruadash. Queen Elena is an interesting card. One of the things that we've seen in, it seems like every other set, we're getting a creature that creates tokens that synergize potentially together. And I'll talk about that in a second, but let me talk about her abilities so we understand what the card's doing. So Queen Elena of Ruadash, power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control. So how many ever creatures you've got on the field, that's the power and toughness of Queen Elena. If one or more creature token would be created under your control, those tokens plus a 1/1 white soldier creature token are created instead. So you cast a spell that creates a creature token, or more precisely, if one or more creature token would be created, okay, and that's the key word there, just created, you get a 1/1 creature token. Here are 2 cards that, just by existing, create creature tokens. So first we have Tauren's Fist of the Angels. For a colorless, a green, and a white, you get a legendary human cleric with training. And whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 green and white human soldier token, creature token with training. So Tauren's brings, every time you cast a creature spell, you get a 1/1 green and white human soldier token. And this synergizes incredibly well with Queen Elena. If they're both on the field, you cast a creature spell. You don't get 1, but you get 2 creature tokens out of it, because Tauren's, when it creates a creature token, causes Elena to create a creature token as well. Then we have Vidalin Resplendent Cathar, who's a legendary human knight for 3 mana as well. Vidalin has vigilance, and Vidalin's power is equal to the number of creatures you control. So Vidalin has been a standard staple for the last year. Mono white has been a deck that almost the entire time, and Vidalin has been the preferred 3-drop in that deck for most of that time, because every time you attack with any creature, Vidalin creates a 1/1 human creature token that's tapped and attacking a player or a planeswalker. So you have Vidalin on the field with Queen Elena, and you're not only creating the 1/1 white human creature token, but you get to create the 1/1 white soldier token as well. And that obviously grows not only Queen Elena, but also Vidalin as well. So I think the question is what goes around these 3 cards. But I think we'll see deck builders try to do this. Now, is this a tier 1 top of the format deck? Probably not, but it's certainly an interesting build around that can flood the board with creatures really fast, and I think with some additional support for some other cards can very, very quickly beat down an opponent, because with Tauren's, he's going to train pretty much every turn he attacks, because you've got cards like Vidalin, you've got cards like Queen Elena that are going to have power greater than Tauren's naturally. With that, then all of the creature tokens that are created from Tauren's, they're going to have trainings. You're going to be training them as well. So you're going to be building this really, really large team of creatures that have a lot of +1/+1 counters on them. So I think this is an interesting build around. I look forward to trying it out in Standard. Our next set of cards are Defenders. I know they're not something we normally get all that excited about, but we've got a number of Defenders in this set and from other sets out there. as well. And what sparked my interest was that Walking Bulwark is a artifact creature golem, okay, for 1 mana. So you get a 0/3 defender. Well, for 2 mana, until end of turn, target creature with defender gains haste, can attack as though it didn't have defender, and assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. Activate only as a sorcery. So for 1 mana, any of your defenders can become attacking creatures when you activate Walking Bulwark's ability. So we got 2 today, Coral Colony and Blight Pile, and each of them, for 2 mana, you're going to get a 3/3 attacking creature if you activate the ability, or you're going to get a 4/4 attacking creature if you activate Walking Bulwark's ability. Or even with activating Walking Bulwark itself, it can become a 3/3 creature. We've seen decks over, really for years that love to turn defenders into attackers. This is our latest set that's going to give us some more of that. Is it a top tier deck? No. Is it a fun deck to play? Yes. Some people are going to be playing it on Friday nights. Next, we have 3 cards that are definitely going to see standard play. How much of it will really depend on the format itself, but I want to make you aware of them. So Citizen's Arrest is a 3 mana for a colorless and 2 white. You get an enchantment that when Citizen's Arrest enters the battlefield, exile target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls until Citizen's Arrest leaves the battlefield. We see this card or an equivalent to it in every 3rd or 4th set. So every standard season, we have access to this card. This is the latest iteration of 3 mana in white, exile a creature or a planeswalker. Okay, you're going to see it. It's just going to be out there. Second, we've got Pilfer for a colorless and a black mana. You get a sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. Again, we've seen various versions of this card. It seems like forever. For 2 mana, go look at your opponent's hand, have them discard something. It's going to see play because there's going to be decks that want to get stuff out of your hand, especially if you're playing a deck that has key cards in it that your opponent's going to want to get rid of. Black decks are going to want to play that. And the last one we have is Timely Interference. And Timely Interference is an instant that when you cast it, target creature gets -1, -0 until the end of turn. And if the spell was kicked, that creature blocks this turn if able. And you get to draw a card with the card. So this is our typical ordinary opt/consider card that for 1 mana we get to draw a card. Those had their abilities with those was scrying or something else that gave us some card filtering with them. But this gives us a different kind of ability, because if you kick it for 1 and a red, you get to make an opponent's creature block. Your opponent probably has a creature that it doesn't want to block with. You can make that creature block for 3 mana. Take it out, maybe free something that you want. I can think of a card that I might want to do that with. Brutal Cathar. That comes to mind very quickly. Brutal Cathar, very few people that play the card ever block with it because they're worried about it dying and releasing the card that's underneath it and giving it back to your opponent. So as a result of that, it doesn't block. Well, Timely Interference can actually make a card like that block. Our last card of the day is Twinferno. So for 2 mana, you get a card that asks you to choose 1. When you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose a new target for that copy, or target creature you control gains double strike until end of turn. This is interesting. This is a 2 mana card, and it does not give you any restrictions on the mana cost of the card that you're copying. We've seen cards like this in red that copy a spell, but it usually has some mana restrictions on it. This one doesn't. And I think that makes it playable in the right kind of spells deck, where we can do big things to an opponent through larger spells. And it'll be interesting to see where this will fit in once we get the full Dominaria United set. Is it spells? Is it easy inclusion? Maybe even the Hinata deck. If the Hinata deck survives rotation, this might be a card that I would want to include in there, because I can copy a spell, I can double something, and I can the spell that comes immediately to mind is, hey, I'd love to copy Magma Opus on a turn. Now, we won't see Magma Opus post-rotation, but that's the spell that's made that Hinata deck really, really powerful over the last 3-4 months. And Twinferno would have been a great card with that, because I can see you cast Twinferno, cast Magma Opus, and pretty much you've probably won the game at that point. So I think this is going to see play. Not exactly sure where, but people are going to figure this one out. And that double strike, don't sleep on that ability, because giving double strike to even a creature like Hinata, do 8 damage on a turn. Well, that might be just enough damage to finish your opponent off. So don't sleep on that part of the ability as well. Well, that's it for today's Dominaria United Sleepers. I want to thank again our sponsor, Caffeinated Gamers, for giving us the opportunity to do these spoiler videos. We'll hopefully be back tomorrow for day 6 of Dominaria United Spoilers. And I will see you then. And if you like the video, give us a like, subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I'll see you next time.